Motion Subtitle Maker is very simple. Once you've exported your subtitles from your editing software, simply import them into After Effects. The script will generate a subtitle composition as well as an XML file. This XML file contains all the information you need to import your subtitles back into the editing software. Here's an overview of Motion Subtitle Maker. Motion Subtitle Maker is a script for After Effects. It works in 3 steps. The first step is to load the subtitles. In the second step, we apply a template to our subtitles. And finally, the third step, we export our subtitles to be integrated into our timeline. To work with Motion Subtitle Maker, we need subtitles in SRT format. So let's start by exporting our subtitles from editing software. For example, in Premiere Pro, to export subtitles, I double-click on a subtitle. In the Captions window, I go to Export, and then Export to SRT. In After Effects, I import my subtitles. Be vigilant about this throughout the process of creating subtitles. SRT file doesn't contain the frame rate information. When loading the subtitles, I have to choose the frame rate that corresponds to the one in my timeline. It is important to keep the frame rate the same throughout the process so that there is no time lag of the subtitles. I can now move on to creating my subtitles. Motion Subtitle Maker comes with an After Effects project that contains multiple templates. To make a chosen template appear in the drop-down menu, simply drag it into the template folder and refresh the list. So I select my composition. In the menu below, new items appear. These elements correspond to the text layers present in the template. Here on the text layer named Line 1, I want to apply the first line of my subtitle. Once selected, I validate by clicking on Apply. A summary is displayed below. When I select the text layer named Line 2 from the menu, I choose my second line of my subtitle from the second list and apply. The summary is updated. If everything suits me, I can generate the compositions. In my project panel, a folder with my compositions to render has been created. There is one composition per subtitle. They were all created based on my template. If now I'd rather try another animation for all of my subtitles, I select another model. On this one, I see that I only have one text layer. So I'm going to apply all of my lines from the subtitle to it and create my compositions. A second folder was created with the compositions based on my new template. I'm happy with this last animation. I can export my subtitles in a still image. I'm going back to Premiere Pro. To import an item, I double-click in an empty space in my project panel. During the creation, an XML file was created. This XML file is actually a sequence with all of my PNG files. To integrate it into my timeline, I select the track I want to place my subtitles on. I place my playhead at the beginning of my sequence and place an endpoint. I drop the sequence that contains my captions into the viewer, and I place an endpoint at the beginning of the sequence. I make sure that the Insert and Overwrite sequence as nest or individual clip option is unchecked and I click on Overwrite. Now I'm going to export them my compositions to video files. Be careful, by default, the FCP XML and XML options are checked. Here, I don't need the FCP XML, so I can uncheck it. Before adding the compositions to the render queue, if the default output module is not in QuickTime format and does not contain an alpha channel, it will offer me a list of all the output modules compatible with the editing software. Validate. Start rendering. In Premiere Pro, I import the XML file that just generated. It's a sequence with my video files, placed at the right timecode. To integrate it into my timeline, I do it the same way. I place my playhead at the beginning of my sequence and place an endpoint. I drop my sequence that contains my subtitles into the viewer. I put an endpoint. I make sure that the Insert and Overwrite sequence as nest or individual clip option is unchecked and I click on Overwrite. If now I have a regret about the previous animation and want to export it, I can still create my videos. But be careful, by default, it will export the last created compositions. For now, it bases its export on the SRT file in the script. The script can be based on the timecode file created the first time of generating the compositions. This file was saved right next to the SRT file and allows us to find the timecodes to make the XML. For use this file, it must not have a reference SRT file in Motion Subtitle Maker. So, I'm deleting my source file. I can now export these animations. I start by checking that the frame rate is correct. Then, in my project panel, I select the folder where my compositions are located and click on Export as Video. As before, compositions are added to the render queue. Now, let's take a look at how to create subtitles from scratch. Let's start in Final Cut Pro. I want this edit to be in vertical format, so I'm duplicating my project and I'm changing the settings. Then I export my subtitles. I can rename them and go back into After Effects. In an empty project, when I import my subtitles, I get a message warning me that there is nothing in the template folder. I start by creating a composition of the desired size. Here I'm in vertical format in 1080 by 1920. If I refresh, the composition still doesn't appear. It must be in the template folder to appear. I'd like to create a 3D text for my subtitles. Let's take a font that's a little bit thick. We can switch our 3D rendering mode to Cinema 4D so we can extract our text. We can add a color to it and give it a slight rotation to see it better. I'm going to increase the spacing. The font may be a bit massive, I'm going to change it. This one is pretty nice. I can add a little edge to it. Alright. I'm refreshing my list. I had already loaded my subtitles. I only have one text layer. I can apply all subtitle lines to my text layer. I don't need to export to video because I don't have an animation. Still images will work. I work in Final Cut Pro. I'm careful to check FCP XML and uncheck XML for Premiere Pro. I can now export all of my subtitles. In Final Cut Pro, I import my FCP XML. To place my subtitles on my main timeline, I select everything. Copy. I'm going to my main timeline. I set my playhead in the beginning and do paste as connect clip. It works the same way in Vinci Resolve. Here I have a square edit. I can export my subtitles in SRT format. I'm going back to my unused templates. I'm going to use this multi-line template. I'm refreshing my list. The template is in vertical format. but I can adapt it very well to the dimension of my timeline. I go into my composition settings. For my example, the timeline format is square. I change the resolution from 1080 to 1080. I import my new subtitles. I select my model. I only have one text layer. I apply all the lines to it. And I'm now creating all my compositions. In Vinci Resolve, I'm going to File, Import, Timeline. Be careful, do not use media from XML, take timeline. Media from XML is used to import a list of clips, not a timeline. As with other software, it created a timeline for me with all my subtitles. To place it in my timeline, I place my playhead at the beginning and I place my timeline which contains my subtitles on place on top. Then I do decompose in place, using clip only. Focus on a practical feature. In After Effects, if I've edited a composition and I want to export just that composition, I can click on the icon on the right. The first one to export a single image in PNG format, and the second one to add to the render queue.